Okay, so now let me share my screen. Okay, kindly let me know if you can all see my screen.
Yes, we can see.
Right. Okay, so this is a little bit it's going to be much more interesting than what we had earlier. So we'll talk about the features and affordances of learning management system for open and distance education, ODE. All right, so what we're going to cover in this session includes the following. We'll talk about understanding Moodle more as a pedagogical tool, as a tool that aid teaching and learning, not as we've talked about LMS as a tech, but now as a teaching tool, as a learning tool. We want to focus more on that. Then we want to explore, the key features such as communication, delivery, assessment, and tracking. We'll talk about alignment of modules with modules affordances with ODL theories in open and distance education. And then we will see how we can optimize the learner experience through data-driven support. I want us to first note that one of the biggest problem of open and distance education, even everywhere in the world, is the problem of attrition. Attrition, in some literature, it is called death, 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 yes, or mortality. All right, mortality. And this is just a simple scenario of a center starting with 100 students in year one. And by the time, at the end of the 4 years, you are having just just 200, just 40 students graduating. All right. So that means you have 60% attrition. 60% of the class could not succeed because of one thing or the other. So that is still the biggest issue in open and distance education as of today. I think I make cases I make references to National Open University. If you look at their last convocation, I think they convocated it was it 13,000 or something thereabouts. But their real student population is over 500,000. And then they've got, you're expecting them to produce 100,000 every year, but it's just 15,000 or 13,000 thereabouts. So that's to tell you there is a big deal that we need to really do, and how LMS can now actually be leveraged to mitigate, the effects of and that can harm with the concept of affordance. What is affordance? If you look at my screen very well, you will notice there is a door handle. Okay, there is a door handle which could be used, intuitively. When you hold the lever, then pull it down, you expect the door to open, and you expect the door to also close when, you use to handle. In the past, or I don't know, when this knob is not there, closing the door becomes a little bit difficult. You have to hold the door by the side and then pull it or push it and quickly remove your hand so you don't you don't injure yourself in the process. All right, so affordance is a property of an object that allows an individual to perform an action. Affordance is a property of an object that allows an individual to perform an action. I don't know where we are all scattered, whether in a conference room or in the office or wherever you are. There is something that affords you to sit comfortably, and that's the chair. All right, you are sitting down on the chair, and then when it comes to time, you want to pick something off the shelf and your hand cannot reach, that same chair can be a ladder or a stepping stool for you. And then you climb on the chair, and then your hand is able to reach. So all these things are not quote and unquote, they are not taught directly, but they are something we perceive psychologically and feel, okay, this instrument should be able to solve this problem for me. All right. So the property of that instrument or the property of that object to be able to solve that problem at that particular time is what we refer to as affordance. And in the case of learning management system, so we want to narrow things down now. We want to go into Moodle learning management system specifically. So Moodle isn't a text box or Moodle forum. The forum in Moodle, for example, is not a text box. It is rather a collaborative, a tool for collaborative reflection. That's another thing. So we'll talk about Moodle forum as time goes on. So the same way some people see Moodle as just a system where you upload the course and the student take the course. No, it's not something like OPay where we send money and another person receives the money. All right. So we want to look at it into the real, feature, into the core functionality within the framework of open and distance education. What can Moodle afford? Let's look at that. What can Moodle afford? First, before we begin to talk about affordance, we talk about the absence of that tool. That is the challenge. When the knob is not on the door, when the door, the key or the knob is not there, what are the challenges you're likely to face? And that was one. It may be difficult to close the door, especially when you want to close it from the opposite direction. If the door is opening inward, if you want to close it from outside, it becomes difficult because you have to put your hand in a difficult position and calculate when to remove the hand and exert and enough pull force to close the door. All right. So and then after that, you in the context of open and distance education, the challenge here is what we refer to as physical separation. That's something I explained earlier. Physical separation. Students and teachers are not at the same place at the same time. So they were separated in times and space. They are separated in geography. And even according to some theory, they are separated psychologically. All right. So the lack of social presence is a challenge in open and distance learning. And what solution does Moodle offer? Creating social presence through digital affordances. Creating social presence through digital affordances. That's in a nutshell. So we're going to look at these digital affordances with time. First, Moodle is not a file repository. Moodle is not about downloading and uploading. In fact, that's the least thing Moodle could do. But that is the best thing some people are reduced Moodle to be. Okay, so it's not about upload and download. It's not about repository. All right. So it is a learning environment on its own. Just as your class, the classroom, the lecture theater, so is Moodle. So we can turn Moodle or we can make Moodle to be. All right. It focuses more on learners' activity, what learners are able to do by themselves. And then the good side to Moodle is that it is first open source. It offers open source flexibility. In the technical term, we use open source to describe those software that have their source code in the open domain. All right. So Moodle have its source code available in the open domain, and then they offer that flexibility that anyone can pick the code, modify it, customize it, and do a lot of fantastic things with it, and then still also reshare. All right. So, and then what is the goal? The goal is to create an equivalent learning experience to face-to-face instruction. And I always add in brackets superior learning experience to face-to-face instruction. If you teach with Moodle, we expect that your teaching hits more targets than what is done in a physical classroom. If you teach in a virtual learning environment, because there is a dimension of motivation that is not present in the physical face-to-face learning environment. But yet, we've gotten a lot of reports that, educational technologies are failing, learning management system are not doing the job, especially, what we experienced during the COVID-19. All right. And then how does Moodle actually shift paradigms? How do they shift paradigm? The first uh, the first point we need to understand is that paradigm in open and distance learning is not the same as what we get in a face-to-face learning. Professors have been teaching for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of their life. And then they will tell you, if comes to mathematics, don't worry, I understand how to teach it. I have 10 years experience. If you take the whole of that 10 years experience directly into open and distance learning education, it's going to be disastrous. Okay, it's going to be disastrous because there is a complete paradigm change. All right. So in a conventional teaching and learning, the paradigm there is that the students are passive listener. They listen passively to lectures. They do what they were told to do. They follow those instructions, and then we guide them. Okay, that is in face to face. But in virtual, it is rather an active involvement of the student that makes them to learn. All right. So it's not about you teaching, but it's about creating an environment for them to learn by themselves on their own. Okay. And your role is also going to shift from you being a teacher to you becoming a facilitator. Right. So you are moving from being a sage on the stage to a guide by the side. All right. So you don't sit on the podium, giving knowledge, talking about things, presenting, making presentation, but rather you become a co-learner. All right, you become someone who creates channels for engagement, who create opportunities for engagement, and the students will construct learning by themselves. So you are not spoon feeding them this time around, but you are making them to find themselves by themselves and then to learn. All right. So let's look at the first theory of distance theory. We call it the transactional distance theory. So this theory was propounded by Moore in the 70s. All right. So Moore, the first thing Moore said about distance learning is that distance is not geographical. It's not a variation in space. Okay. It's not a variation in space. All right. He did not define distance in terms of physics. Distance is equal to, is that not speed over time? All right. No, but rather a psychological gap between the student and the teacher. So first we need to see distance from that point of view. Distance is a psychological gap between the student and the learner. At times when you see who is teaching you, it makes more sense than listening to a virtual lecture. Thank God for what's it called now, the way COVID-19 had helped us to evolutionize what we call virtual teaching and so on and so forth. Before now, it's boring for somebody to be at one end and then start teaching. It get boring. Everybody wants to tune off. But right now, because of the principle of use, we are used to it. However, the gap still exists. The psychological gap still exists. I know if I am in the class, if we are all in the same location, there are certain dimension. Maybe I would have cracked a joke, everybody would have laughed. But right now, I don't have the opportunity to do that. And even if I crack a joke, do I even understand how to crack a joke? Okay, things like that. So it's there. It creates a psychological, space barrier that we need to really overcome. And first understanding what this psychological space, then it can now help us how to understand how we can create interaction that bridges, these gaps. Effective learning in a distance learning environment is fostered by the amount of interaction or the quality of interaction we are able to generate. Effective learning in open and distance education depends highly on the quality of interaction that we are able to create within the virtual learning environment. And according to the theory, to the transactional distance theory, these interactions are categorized into three. The first is dialogue, and dialogue refers to the interaction between the instructor and the learner, the instructor speaking to the learner. Then the second one is the structure. Structure. So these are the elements that pertains to design of the educational programs, the courseware, and all that. How these things are interconnected, how we're able to build them into a scaffold for the learner to learn from. And then finally, we talk about autonomy, learner autonomy. This is the variable that reflects the degree of control the learner have over the learning process. When you liken these two interaction, or these three level of interaction, with what happens in the face-to-face learning environment, you will see that opposite is the case. Talking about dialogue, yes, there is dialogue, and that dialogue is from the teacher to the student, and mostly not vice versa, except in cases when there is question and answer. Okay? Then the structure, of course, the man will give you handouts, and then he will ask you to do a lot of assignments. But all these are done at the expense of the learner's autonomy. The learners are not in charge. The teacher owns the absolute control is with the teacher. So one thing he wants to do, he doesn't want to trade that autonomy for anything. Oh, that lecturer is coming. Even some people believe that they will not be respected if they part without autonomy. But the transactional distance theory is telling us that that is the first thing. You switch the owner of the autonomy. The students are in charge. Yeah, I am a facilitator. I am not the teacher. I am not a lecturer. I'm a facilitator. So I'm only there to help you to facilitate, whatever you want. You still have absolute control over your learning. You still have absolute control over your learning process. You take over, you're in charge. All right. And that is one thing we really need to understand when we're talking about open and distance education. All right. So then we talk about the core. That interaction is broken further into the three core interactions that occur on an open and distance learning environment. And this is the learner content interaction, which is very similar to the kind of system we build, usually facilitated by the systems or the structures. So this is the interaction between the learner and the educational material content. Then we talk about the learner instructor. Learner instructor. So learner instructor is there. So the interaction between the learner and the instructor or the facilitator. And finally, we've got the learner-learner interaction. So interaction between learner or among the learners. When learners speak to learner, when learners seek help, not from you again now, but from themselves, and then how they are able to create this kind of environment. But the learner instructor and learner kind of interaction will never occur if the structure is not in place, if the structures are not provided for, if the structures are not taken care of. This kind of interaction will never surface. All right. So maybe when we get to ETVT, I'll still buttress more on that. So I'm giving this so that we will be able to, I'm creating this as a form of scaffold, such that when we get to that place, we'll be able to, connect ideas with ideas. First, we'll talk about the philosophy, Moodle learning management system, the philosophical underpinning of this learning management system. The first is that it is built on the constructivist learning paradigm, constructivist learning theory. And then this is an educational philosophy where learner build their own understanding through experiences and reflection. All right. Learner builds their own learning. They build their own knowledge through their experience and how they are able to reflect to make do with what happened. They don't just it's impossible for them to actually, just things are not just casual. They don't, it's not at the level of knowing. It's at the higher order thinking and all that. And it has to do with engagement, how they are engaging and how they are able to construct their own learning. All right, there have been a lot of things to learn about constructivist learning theory, and then there are a lot of things to learn about them. All right, so then under the constructivist learning theory, we've got something called the social constructivism. The social constructivism. The social constructivism talks more about the importance of social interaction and culture and cultural contexts in the construction of knowledge. Social interaction is very, very important. One of the proponents of this is Vygotsky theory, I think in 1975. All right, so he explained the importance of what we call MKO, the more knowledgeable others, helping you to learn. Someone that know it more than you within your community can really be the scaffold you need to go from what you know to what you are supposed to know. All right. So social constructivist theory, and then this theory are great. Okay, I'll talk more on forum. I don't want to jump. I don't want to jump. So let's look at the last concept. That's learning through interaction. Yes, that is how learning will take place, whether learner-learner interaction, learner-instructor, or learner-context interaction. All right. Then another concept is the social presence, which builds on the constructivist theory. So social presence is the degree to which the learner feel connected with their instructors and peers in a digital learning environment. How much they feel so connected, how much connection was created or was generated between the learners and their instructors. So if the connection is much, it creates a psychological gap. Sorry, if the connection is little, so it creates a psychological gap and the students will be disengaged. But if the connection is so great to the extent that they feel like you are just right there beside them, even in their most difficult moments of learning. All right. So, and that builds consistency, that builds engagement, that builds ability for the students to learn. So, that is what is most important. It's not about the amount of teaching you are able to do on a virtual space, but rather the amount of connection the students are able to build with you. Okay. So, we'll talk about what does this bring to open and distance education. What is the implication of instructor feasibility? The first is that it reduces the invisible teacher effects rather. It reduces the invisible teacher effects. Oh, we don't even see that guy. What is he doing? We don't know. And once they cannot relate, they disconnect. They disconnect. All right. Then other thing is that it builds trust and motivation. It builds trust and motivation. Then it combats isolation. A lot, because you are on your own. The students are always on their own, and it can give them a sense of isolation. And when isolation sets in, you will see students that are supposed to turn in their assignment, they are failing, to meet deadline. They are not turning up assignment. They are not cooperating again. They are not attending lectures, and that is the beginning of dropout. All right. So building social presence can actually help us to navigate this. And what are the model tools that can actually help us to build this? The first one is what we call the forums. Forum is what I also tag as anchor, something that binds us together. All right. So we've got the forum, we've got the shop, the coffee shop forum, I will explain a lot about that as time goes on. We've got announcements and messages, something that we always help us to create a form of dropping I don't know, a bond of unity among the learners, and then between the instructor and the learners also, making people to feel like they are still within reach, they are in touch, getting in touch with people. If you notice, between Sunday and now, you will have gotten at least maybe 3 emails from the UBLearn learning management system. And that's how to keep in touch. People get in touch. If I send an assignment, you all get the notification. If I do this, you all get the notification. Oh, you know that somebody is going to be there. And it wants to make us all to be accountable. Even though this is a very short course, maybe a 2-day course, and then it can still be very, very engaging, and then everybody will feel being within the reach. All right, now let's look at these forums. What do they do? So we've got different types of forum, and the first one I will explain is the standard forum. So apart from standard forum, we've got the Q&A forum, we've got a single discussion forum, and we've got a coffee shop forum. So I will explain the differences among these 4 categories and how best we can use them. So talking about the standard forums, the standard forum is an open discussion board where any participant can start a new topic or thread at any time, and anyone can reply. So any participant, whether the student, whether the instructor, they can just create a topic of their own interest, and people that are interested in the same topic can go there to reply and do, and engage. So that is what we call standard forum. All right, that is what we call standard forum. So it is most flexible and commonly used type of forum in Moodle. All right, and then we can do things like general discussion, weekly reflections, and sharing resources, and any other scenario where you want open-ended multi-topic conversation. So open-ended multi-topic conversation, and those topics can be created by the participants, can be created by the students. All right, so then another one is that what is the implication of this? The implication is that social, it fosters social presence connection. So it supports broad learner to learner interaction by giving students freedom to initiate dialogue, not just to respond to the instructor. Okay, so that is what we call uh, the standard forum in Moodle. So students can also create their own topic of interest, and then other students can engage. All right. Then the second one is what we call the Q&A forum, the question and answer forum. How does this play? The instructor posts a question, and students must submit their own answer before they can see anyone else's responses. It's a question. It's an open-end. It's like I'm posting a question, and then maybe I have 30 students in my class. But the idea is that nobody is going to see my response until I have responded first. Okay, so there is a built-in delay, typically 30 minutes for other posts before other posts can become visible. So also we can do a delay of about 30 minutes. So you won't see anything until about 30 minutes later. All right, before you can now see what others have posted. But you first need to respond first. So why is this? What is the affordance of this? It's good for, exercising learners' critical thinking, doing case study response, and, any prompts that you want students to present their own original idea, original thinking without peer influence. In face-to-face classroom, when you ask some questions, you get some kind of a copycat response. Oh, someone have said something. Then when you ask others, they now say, that's exactly what I want to say. Okay, I agree with him, what he said. Or they repeat what someone has said in their own words. Even that is still a good thing to do. But you know, the copycat idea, the copycat response, kind of a problem is there, has been mitigated by the question and answer forum. So, what strategy or what approach of social presence does this create? This can help to strengthen the learner content interaction first. All right, so the student is interacting with the lecturer's question before now engaging with other learners. Okay, then this opens to the learner-learner interaction once responses are feasible, encouraging comparison and then follow-up discussion, encouraging diversification of ideas, encouraging, different perspective to learning or concepts. All right, so we have another one called the single threaded forum or single discussion. So single discussion, this is when instructor can probably create a topic, and no one can add new thread except for you to reply. So the instructor will be the one to initiate the idea. They will be the one to generate what we want to talk about. Other students cannot create their own, but they can all respond to that same, thread that had been initiated by the instructor. So this is best for focused debates. If we want to debate on a single topic, if we want to debate on a single idea, this is just okay. So we want everybody to channel their thoughts into this. So it is useful for short courses or micro modules where multiple thread could be overwhelming. So for short courses like this, we'll be deploying single, discussion, single thread discussion. So what this does is that it helps us to foster real conversation and than having scattered idea. So real conversation over the same thing, over the same issue, than everybody creating their own, different forums or fora. Then the most fantastic one, or the one I love so much about, and let me also call it one of the most controversial type, is what we call the coffee shop forum. Coffee shop forum. Please, we don't have much of coffee shop in Nigeria, but we have Meshai, the Meshai joints. When we come there in twos, in threes, our friends, even people we don't know, while we are waiting to be served by Meshai, you know, we are talking about politics. You're talking about Arsenal and Man U football. We are talking about various topics of interest. You are having fantastic discussion, okay? And while you are waiting to be served, and that when you are being served, and maybe they are boiling egg for you or frying eggs, making your bread, zipping your tea. You have fantastic things to talk about. Some people talk about, a lot of various topics, okay, that we talk about. It's very open. It's open. All right. So, and that is where it got its name from. So the name itself is intentional, being a coffee shop. Some people call it water cooler, some people call it student lounge. So it signals to learner that this space is different from an academic forum. It's psychologically permissive. Now, let me set an example. I don't know if we have done this or if we used to do this. When we create WhatsApp group and people begin to discuss things that are outside of the topic, what do we do? What's our reaction? No, 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 please take it down. It's not relevant for this group. We shut people down. We discourage people not to talk out of the topics. And do you know that is one of the primary cause of disengagement in open and distance education? People have things that interest them. People have things they want to talk about. But because the group had been labeled biology 101 or physics 255 and this, so they must think about physics to engage. All right. It's not just about, we have to see the social dimension of learning beyond the topic at hand. So it's good why we have some dedicated what's it called? Some dedicated platform for discussing topics, for discussing issues and concepts. It's also good for us to consider creating platforms that can allow students to share, diverse contextual issues, diverse social issues, politics, and so on, and feel free and not feel that they are judged. So that is what we could build a community, which is what we most needed for online teaching and learning. All right. So let's talk about the strategy. In any of these that we're doing, we need to first look for the good prompts, a topic that will spur interest across diverse learner. And then we need to set up the subscription mode. The subscription mode automatically creates notification for everyone once somebody responds. So if we had created something and someone had responded, everybody in the class will get a notification that somebody, okay, Dr. Zubero had responded and he said this. So it want to spoil your interest. You want to go back there to respond to him. If you don't share his opinion, you go there to counter him and all that. So making it fun. So we need to really deploy this strategy when we are implementing our own blog. All right, about our own forum. Sorry, and then there is another affordance that Moodle gives, and that affordance is what we call the announcements. So we've got to announcements and messaging. When do we use announcements? When should we use messaging? Announcement is a kind of one-to-many channel of information. So I am the instructor. I want to talk to all the students at once. So I will deploy announcements. But if I want to talk to everybody, I want to talk to if I just want to talk to just one student, then what I'm going to deploy is what I call messaging. Now, announcements are broadcast to a large audience and are often, they often offer one-to-many kind of relationship, while messaging is personalized, targeted at one user. So when do you use messaging? When do you use announcements? When you want to talk to everybody, when you want to make just to make announcements as that. So when you want to talk to every member of the class, but if you have a specific issue that you want to discuss with one of the students, maybe you want to follow up on them, how they are doing individually, why have they not been attending classes, why are they not been submitting the assignment? Yes, that is when you talk to messaging. All right, we used to have these issues. I don't know, here in our university, and I used to see people correcting others. Maybe during the festive period, through the email forum, the vice chancellor, maybe, or the registrar is greeting everybody, and people want to respond to the vice chancellor. They will copy all. They will copy all and send the message. So everybody on the mail trail will be seeing their responses, or they want to discuss their personal issue. Instead of you to reply only to the source or to the sender, they reply to everybody. So the whole university community, they see whatever they are typing. So we need to know when to leverage, each of these. Okay. All right. On the next one, we talk about the content structuring tips. These are other things that we can use to engage students effectively in open and distance learning. I'll just speak about this briefly. So when we are creating pages, for example, in ODL, let our pages be chunked. There is a concept in open and distance in educational technology called cognitive load theory. It's a theory. Cognitive load theory talks about, the amount of information that can be processed by the learner's working memory. And once the working memory is overloaded, then we talk about cognitive overload. So the students now process information slowly, and much of what is given to them may not eventually end up into learning. So when we are typing, when we are creating our notes, we should afford long pages. Okay, it's better to have 10 short pages than to have 2 long pages. So 10 short pages are more engaging are much more better and much more effective than having two long pages. The same thing, it's just psychological. When you take your WhatsApp message, someone sent you a WhatsApp message, and after reading a very lengthy message, you still read more. You click read more, you still read lengthy message, you see another read more. I'm very sure 2 out of 10, or let me say 8 out of 10 people will not continue with that message because it's boring and it's lengthy. Okay. So we'll talk about the use of book resource is also another feature of Moodle, which help us to convert our, maybe we have created hard copy Moodle, or you have written something that looks like a textbook, or you have created instructional module or instructional notes. So Moodle book resource can really help us to put these things together such that students can flip from page to page. So collection of multiple pages, all right, can be done using using book resources. All right, let me quickly admit this new person. Then I'm moving on. We'll talk about the interactive content and H5P. This is another feature that that's available in Moodle Learning Management System. So interactive content, just like I said, it's an authoring tool that helps you to create HTML5 content such as video, quizzes, and more without having to master your how to write codes. So H5P can also come with embedded quizzes where you can, after they have watched a video, the length of video, then they can be asked questions based on the video. And that can also be customized based on their responses. If they have responded well, they can advance or, take them back to learn other things before continuing. Then we talk about advanced quizzes and adaptive pathways. So this is a feature of Moodle which allows students to go their own routes based on their responses, based on their learning capacity, based on their ability. So we can design such that when students are not responding so well, then they have their own custom journey. So they can now, maybe I put a question to them and they are not able to answer that question correctly. So I take them through another route so as to learn to master the concept. Then they come back, ask the question again. If they're able to answer correctly, then they go through another part. So these have all the affordances that Moodle Learning Management System offers into open and distance learning students. We talk about rubrics and assignments rather. So we all know what assignment is. Assignment is what we give for students to do. Some people call it homework. But when assignment comes with rubric, what does that do? It gives a transparent grading criteria. The students know exactly what you are looking for. They are not just troubleshooting to get an answer. They know exactly what you want them to do. So learning for them will be their ability to provide, to provide an answer, to provide or to get, the valid response based on your set criteria. So it is also a form of a feed-forward mechanism. It offers feed-forward mechanism and also improves students' performance even before submission. All right, they don't wait to be graded before they know the quality of what they have done. So if they have done well, they know before submitting. All right, so that is what the assignment and rubrics, the combination of the two, that is what it all afford in Moodle Learning Management System. And in cases, in one of the ways of application is by deploying workshop activity. When we talk about workshop activity, we talk about the structured peer assessment activity where students both submit their own work and evaluate their classmate submission using the criteria defined by the instructor, using the rubric set by the instructor. So it is giving the student two ways, two roles. The two roles is that every student is first an author, is first a student submitting their own work, and also a reviewer. So they review other people's work. So they are now going to be judged based on their own performance, on their own work, and their ability to review other people's work. All right, their ability to review other people's work. Participants, please, in the course of my presentation, I noticed the Vice Chancellor coming in. I don't know if I'm right. I think we should take time to acknowledge the presence of the Vice Chancellor. Yes, Dr. Zubero, over to you, please.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, thanks so much. During your presentation, Dr. Akola, actually the Vice Chancellor joined. I was supposed to actually send the link to him, but I presume he was very busy. Yeah, I just remembered now, Dr. Osbe reminded me and I forwarded to him. And fortunately, he joined. You are welcome, sir. The Vice Chancellor, you are welcome, sir. I'm sure you are muted, sir. I don't know whether you are talking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And
okay.
Thank you very much for having me. And I'm very grateful that this workshop is coming up at this time. And we hope and pray that the individual participant will gain a lot of knowledge, knowing fully well my friend Koladapi is the one, presenting. I will be on and off because of the activities that I have here in Kano. But all the same, I will be following. Thank you very much and God bless.
Thank you so much, the Vice Chancellor. Vice Chancellor said, I'm his friend. No, I'm his son. I'm his son in Kwara.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Director, over to you, sir. Want to say something? All right. I think we can just continue, and then let's continue before that's welcoming the Vice Chancellor. So we're talking about what the affordances of assessments and rubrics, and then how the combination of the two can actually create a dimension or a workshop dimension in open and distance education. Just imagine when your students feel like they are part of the jurists, they are part of the community that grades other people's, they grade their colleagues' work. And this can also be done completely via blind review or open review, whatever it is. We can do open review or we can do blind review. So depending on your choice or your use case. All right. So, and then what benefits does it bring? First is critical thinking, asking the questions that matter, thinking of other people's answer. Maybe that can also be a dimension to so maybe that can also be a dimension to learning also, and then giving opportunity for reflection and also generating deeper engagement for the learners also. So when we want to set up a workshop, where there are 5 stages in going about this. The first stage is what we call the setup phase. This is where the instructor configure the activity, define submission requirements, create the assessment form, the rubric, the criteria, or the grading guide, or whatever we call the marking guide. and then set deadlines. The instructor will also be the one to set the deadline, and student can see the activity, but no, at times you can set it whether you want them to see, but they cannot interact until the commencement date. Then after that, we talk about the submission phase. The submission phase is when students upload their work, and their work can be in form of essay, it can be in form of reports, presentation, projects, and so on and so forth. And then the submission window has a clear open and close date. There is always a clear open and close date. And then this will help us to create structures and accountability. Then on the third phase is where the assessment, the real assessment began. And, Moodle automatically or manually allocates peer submissions to reviewers. All right. It allocates, the submissions to reviewers, and each student receives 1 or 2 or 3, depending on the setup, classmates work to evaluate. So they get, the works of their colleagues, which they are going to evaluate, and using the instructor's rubrics. Okay, so this is the heart of the activity. I want us to pause and think and reflect. When you get the marking guide, and you yourself, you have participated in the same exam, and they gave you the marking guide, okay, for you to grade others. You are not coming out of that activity only based on what you have known. Rather, you are coming out of the activity with vast knowledge, vast experiences, what other people are writing that are correct or that are not correct. So you are coming with a bigger or deeper level of knowledge and understanding, after such activity. Then you get, after the next phase is the grading evaluation phase. So the instructor review the quality of students' assessment, not their own submission now, but what they have assessed. So Moodle can calculate the grading grade, which measures how well each student, assess their peer, how well you assess your peer. So like I said, you are getting 2 scores. You are getting score for your own work you have submitted, and you are getting grade for how good you are at assessing other people's work. All right. So the final score can then be published and be submitted for for the students, and then it goes into their own record books. Then finally, I want to talk about this phase. I will talk about what the SAMR, substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition model. So what it does and how it can really guide us into integrating Moodle learning management system in open and distance learning. The SAMR model propounded a 4-level of technology integration in teaching and learning. And each level represents a deeper integration of technology, from simply replacing the traditional method to fundamentally reimagining what is possible. Okay, so from simply replacing to fundamentally, critically or thinking creatively of what is possible. Now, let's take for an instance. Okay, before getting to taking the instances, let's look at the model. If you look at the right hand side of the screen, you see the first 2 stages. The first 2 stages are also referred to as the enhancement stage. So where you are enhancing the ongoing system, you are enhancing the current system. All right. And then the last 2 stages is the transformation. This is where you begin to transform. And you can transform either at the level of modification, modifying what is currently ongoing, or redefining what is currently ongoing. So if we're going to transform open and distance learning or open and distance education in Nigeria, we need to be talking about how can we redefine, how can we modify, okay, rather than looking at substitution or augmentation. All right. So let's look at, I've got 2 case studies. First is at the level of substitution. you see a lecturer now begins to upload PDF. Okay, instead of giving hard copy handouts, instead of giving no, we are going online now, we are going online. What are you doing? The only thing you are doing is just to upload PDF somewhere. Well, it's still a level of integration, but that level is just very low. It's the level of substitution. So you are substituting face-to-face giving of material, giving of teaching and learning textbooks with uploading contents and doing that. Then the student will, at the other hand, they will be able to download and also consume the knowledge corpus. Then the second phase is augmentation. So augmentation in this case can be like, you don't just give quizzes now. You don't just give quizzes. You give quizzes with feedback, custom feedback. CBT is just giving quizzes. I mean, computer-based test. Now we are now looking at what about when you give after a computer-based test, the student can see their results, they can see their responses to each questions, what their response is and what is the correct answer. So that is giving quiz with feedback. So that is augmentation. You have augmented, you are still using the same CBT process, but you've added a layer to it, you've added a level to it. Okay, so that is augmentation. Then modification can now be in the form of probably, a forum-based discussion, when students now have to, to channel, to leverage on their own community, on the student community and the instructor community, to generate new forms of idea, new forms of knowledge. Then finally, redefinition can now be, maybe in this case, you can use students, generated glossaries, students generating their own definition of terms and terminologies. So that would be, the case for redefinition. Now, the key takeaway here is that we need to move away from substitution. We need to move beyond the level of substitution. We don't want to create a learning management system that all our lecturers will be doing is to be uploading content. We've uploaded the PDF, we've uploaded the videos. No, 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 no. We need to really leverage on that social constructivism theory, okay, social constructivist theory, and then allow students to engage whether with the material, with themselves, and with you. All right. So another example is what I call making what we have done with this presentation. Maybe we want to apply this. So at this level, substitution will still be the basic, file upload, creating static page, content distribution. Okay, you got a video on the YouTube, you brought it here. Yeah, that would be level of substitution. Okay. And then because without me setting up the LMS, student can still have access to the content, they can still have access to the video and all that. But I am substituting that access by, using the LMS. Okay. Then the second phase can be something like augmentation, can now be the use of book resources as explained in the 15 in slide 15, quizzes with feedback as explained in 18 and so on, completion tracking and so on and so forth. Then modification can be introduction of interactive content from H5P, SCORM, and so on and so forth, rubric-based assessment. And then redefinition can now be a kind of a workshop peer assessment, analytic-driven interventions, creating coffee shop community building, and adaptive conditional pathway. So all these can be discussed as a form of redefinition. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, on this note, I really want to uh, draw a pause to see if we've got additional comments, questions, answers, responses, and the likes. So the conversation is open now.
So thank you, Dr. Koledafe, for the insightful facilitation of the workshop. Grateful. We are still, what to say, enhancing our capacity. No wonder it is a capacity building workshop. So at this point, if members, participants have questions, Dr. Ahmad, so we have someone here. Dr. Ahmad, go ahead.
Sorry, please, I just need clarification. Because while you are explaining autonomy,
Okay.
so you said the autonomy, the explanation actually emphasized on the degree of control learners have over the learning process. So I was thinking, is the teacher or the facilitator that will have control over the learning process?
Okay.
Can you expatiate on?
All right, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that insightful question, sir. What we talk about learner autonomy is learners being in charge of their own learning, taking control of what they learn and how they learn. All right. So in a traditional teaching and learning environment, the autonomy belongs to the teacher. The teacher determines when to learn, where to learn, how to learn. So whether we are going to use projector in the class or we are not going to use projector in the class is strictly at the discretion of the teacher. So whether we are going to have CA on the first week or every week, it is at the discretion of the teacher. All right. So the students don't have a say on that. At times they might protest, yeah, and that's the reason. That's why it's a protest. Okay, they protest. Oh, we can't do it. We are busy. Oh, we have another class. That's a protest. It's not because they have control, and it's because of the lack of control that made them to protest. But in open and distance learning, we leverage resources like courseware. All right, it's just that this training had been, have been designed to focus on learning management system. So we've got tools like courseware, which guide the students into decision making, which guide the students into knowing what to read, when to read, what to submit as assignment, when to submit the assignment, what kind of questions they want to answer, and so on and so forth. All right. So it guides them into a lot of that. And then they can determine, they know that, okay, the semester is going to have maybe 10 weeks of online learning. And then, of course, I can do all my courses together. You know what you will do in week 3, you know what we do in week 4. So you've got control when you want to submit and all that. You've got everything pre-planned. And you can even go ahead, if it is self-paced and all that. So that autonomy is out of the hand of the teacher because of that physical separation. All right. So maybe you are working with CBN, and you know that by June you are going to be traveling to different parts of the country on monitoring and evaluation cases. You are not going to be chanced. All right. So you can do your work in April, May, complete everything you want to do, send your parcel, submit your things, schedule it. When the teacher wants to see it, they will get to see it. And you are free during those periods. That is the autonomy we're talking about. That is the control. So they are in charge of their own learning. All right. Even in open and distance education, at times students will tell you, even despite the fact that you have set an exam, they may tell you that, oh, during that period, we have this and this, we are busy, so I will not be able to take my test around that time. So kindly help me to shift my own test or my own exam to specific dates. They've got that kind of leverage which they can put in. So the control is more in the hand of the student more than it is in the hand of the teacher in open and distance learning. And when you compare that with what is obtainable in a face-to-face learning environment. All right. I hope I'm able to answer the question.
Yes, I think you have done that, sir. But I don't know, maybe something related to this that you have said. Someone has a question: how does ODL become superior learning experience than face-to-face? So maybe partly you have answered the question. Can you, but maybe expatiate on this? How
All right.
does
Thank you so much. I love when I'm being asked that questions, and I'm happy to answer mostly like as an educational technology. Now, if you look at studies that integrate technology with, maybe with face-to-face learning or to do one thing or the other, the response are, let me say, 9 out of 10 comes positive. They tell you technology improve learning. They tell you technology improve learning. Yes, anyway. Now, it's a research. I'm talking about research. Because when you talk about actual implementation, there are so many flaws that, there are so many things that people are not doing correctly, and then they get the other results. Fine. So that's to say that technology have an inherent ability to improve learners' performance. And it may not be that directly, but we know that there is a correlation between technology use and motivation, technology use and engagement, technology use and the rate of assimilation. All these three are indicators to, improved performance, better understanding, better conceptual understanding, and all that. Okay, so in our conventional face-to-face teaching and learning, research have shown us that even without quality teachers, students can still pass WAEC effortlessly. Without quality teachers, without saying, oh, you have hired a quality biology teacher. So some students will still have A in biology. So that tells you that there is a student agency, in going into examination. So that is, let's call that equation 2. Equation 3 now boils down to the fact that you need motivation to learn. Everybody that learn or that have succeeded in one field or the other are people who are motivated about the field, okay? Whether intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. Anybody who come to open and distance learning, they are all motivated candidates, so to say. Something motivated them to come to open and distance learning, whether positively or negatively. Oh, I've been on this position for the past 6 years. I can't go because I don't have a certificate. Oh, let me go and enroll in ODL so I can keep my job and I can also get the certificate. That is a motivation. Oh, I'm not able to gain admission to University of Ilorin because of the quota system. Okay, let me enroll in open and distance learning. Maybe I can also get my degree in time while also working. That's also motivation. So almost, anybody that will succeed in open and distance learning are motivated. So when motivation, the natural motivation, the natural intrinsic motivation meets technology, which is a source of extrinsic motivation, motivation increases. And that yields a better performance in learning. Okay, so and that is why I put in brackets and I always say that ODL, we provide a superior learning experience to what face-to-face, what is obtainable in face-to-face teaching and learning. So that is why I made that statement, because if you look at it theoretically, conceptually, you see that there are chances of students doing better, performing better in open and distance education than what is obtainable in face-to-face. However, the implementation phase in, I think Dr. Zubair is there, our popular model called ADI, analyze, design, develop, implement. If the implementation phase is faulty, then we can now rubbish the entire technology. Oh, students are not doing fine. So if you look at the cases where EduTech has been reported as a source of failure in a system, we need to zoom in at their implementation level. And that is the case, or that happened in Sweden recently, I think last year, where the government said they are rolling back to paper and pencil, And then, how things can be so political. We are going EduTech, billions was invested, and the result was not gotten. So, and it all boils down to their level of implementation. So if ODL is implemented rightly, the right technology at the right time is done, we are going to create a superior learning environment and learning experience to whatever is obtainable in face-to-face. And that does not rubbish the achievements of face-to-face. That does not rubbish what face-to-face have done. As a matter of fact, if there was no face-to-face, ODL may not even survive. So that is just the clarity I want to give. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
We have another colleague who needs a brief clarification on something you have said. I wanted to add on what he said, just one more item. Okay. Doctor, actually, I think the most important, or one of the most important superiority of the ODL over the face-to-face is the ability to gather data on the learning experience, which might not be there in face-to-face. And that data is very much ready for assessment, very much ready for tracking, very much ready for research. So which definitely is not there in face-to-face. So for ODL, I think one of the major advantages is that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that insightful thing. You know, we get, I tell my student that when you people are preparing to go on lesson on micro teaching or teaching practice, you write your lesson note that by the end of this course, students should be able to do this, and you have 45 minutes. How do you know that that's learning happen within that your 45 minutes? So, but ODL give us a platform to actually, collect that as a form of data, do demographic justice to learning. That is a little bit difficult to achieve in face-to-face teaching and learning environment. Thank you so much for that insightful comment, sir.
Thank you very much.
Even though we have run out of time for break, but still over to a colleague, one person now. Dr. Ismail, over to you. HOD Computer Science.
Thank you, Dr. Kolawole. Based on the question that Dr. Ahmad asked on teachers, learners settings, that the learners should have time, or they are the one that will fix maybe a time for their quiz or test or exams. I think Moodle, based on my experience, Moodle is an open source. And since it is an open source, it is the teacher that will upload all the document, and he is the one that will set the time for the quiz. That is maybe quiz, we call it quiz or test or even exams. So it is not going to be open for a student to say that he is going to have the exam on so time. Based on our settings, since we are following, let's say, the British system, not the American system, even though we are neither the British system nor the American system, we are just at the middle. So I think you need to elaborate more on this, because to me, the way I understand it is like you have leave it to the student for them to decide, which I think in our system is not going to work out like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, HOD Computer Science. Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, we're talking about affordances. And then that was where we started this conversation from. I can note this. All right, thank you. So that was where we started this conversation from. All right. What is possible with Moodle or with the concept of open and distance learning? I need to play safe because I think Dr. Zubairu corrected me that the name of the center is Distance Learning Center. I think our Center for Distance Learning. I think so. So the word open is not there. So let us put that on one note. But generally, in the context of open and distance learning, there is something we call open pedagogical practices, OPP. In the extreme of OPP, students have absolute control even to the duration of the program, is all in their hand. You can take, they only say that this program, the minimum you have is 3 years for you to complete. But if you want to do it for 10 years, we are there, you are there. If you want to be doing 2 courses or 3 courses in a year, it's up to you. So they've got the absolute control. That is a system. The system of distance learning is a little bit more rigid than open learning. Distance learning are more controlled. Okay, this is the time we self-form, this is the time we admit, this is the time they write exams, this is the time they do this and that. So that is understandable in distance learning. But in open learning, okay, and that's not saying, even in distance learning, that's not saying that the students are devoided of their autonomy, of their control totally. But part of the autonomy has been traded for the structure that has been set in place by the school or by the institutions. All right. So we really need to really draw the balance. Where are we as a center? So what are the things that are obtainable based on our models of operations? So that is where we really need to draw the balance. But in terms of the affordance, yes, student, even in distance learning, if you let's say we have a pregnant student that was to deliver, that had delivery, during the time of examination, we still do make up for them. Okay, maybe after 1 week or 2 weeks or after a certain period, we'll say we are organizing makeup for you and all that. So that is also possible via Moodle. So that's what we're saying in the end of, or in the end of the continuum, where open learning is focused on, yes, students have absolute autonomy. In the other hand, where it is, where we are mixing it with the regimented system of semester and then fixed calendar, yes, the autonomy is reduced in that case. So I think whatever position we are standing from depends on what we are actually operating. But my presentation had focused on the affordances, what it affords, right? So that is my response to your comments, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all these insights you have given to us about distance learning, open learning, what have you. So I think since we have in the next session, according to the agenda, in the last session, we are going to have interactive engagement, including questions and answer, reflection, and so on over what has been done today before we call it a day. So I think I will request that with the permission of the director at this point, we can stop, we can pause, to have a lunch break where some of us or all of us participating are going to pray, to eat, and then to come back. Expecting that also at your own end, Dr. Koledafi, you will also relax, and then you take water, you eat possibly before we come back. So there is a little adjustment on the time of the next activity. Earlier on, according to the agenda, it was planned to hold in 1 hour. But now, with the directive of the director, please, we want to be on the same page with you, that we are reducing it to 30 minutes, so that we can be able to finish not later than maybe 30 minutes after 3, considering the time we are now. If this is okay, then we can go for the break.
All right. Okay, thank you. We'll meet back in 30 minutes and we'll conclude everything 30 minutes after.
Sorry, 30 minutes makes it 2:15.
Yeah.
Dr.
Okay.
Zubairu.
No.
Yeah, I think 2:30 is okay.
30 minutes from now is 2:15.
Now it's quarter to 10.
It's quarter to 2 now.
I think 30 minutes is okay for us. Yeah. So yeah, 30 minutes is
I
okay.
think
It's
I'm
okay.
going by what the director has
said. And a reason being, actually, the interactive section, I presume, already started in a way. So we can just come back, spend another 30 minutes and leave. How am I voting? Yes. Okay.
All right. So the same link we still hold. I won't stop the meeting. So let us we can join with the same link, and then